everyone, it's Sunday, August 11th, 2019, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today we're joined by Patrick Hoffman, who will be speaking about the rule of 7, how to structure your product organization to succeed. Allow me to briefly explain the format. So the Product Mentor program was started several years ago, matches product leaders and seasoned product professionals with those earlier in their career, product managers, aspiring product managers, for mentorship and guidance. We're joined by a number of folks in the active session, both mentors and mentees. If everyone could just wave really quickly. Cool. You see them all here. We're going to go around the room for brief introductions. If everyone could state their name, location, role, and whether they're a mentor or mentee, that'd be great. Let's start with Brian.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Postelnick. I'm a product mentor in this program. I've been a product manager for 6 years. I'm currently a product manager at Angie's List. I'm based in Indianapolis, Indiana.
And Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex Berry. I'm a product manager in London for a company called LexisNexis, and I'm a mentee.
Awesome. And Chris.
Yep, I'm Chris Butler. I'm Chief Product Architect at IPsoft, and I'm based out of New York, and I'm a mentor.
And Daniel.
I'm Daniel Ponsegui, based in Toronto, mentee, and work at a company called Modo Insight.
Awesome. Fabiola.
Hi, brother. I'm Fabiola, originally from Chile, but living and based in Mexico City. So I'm a mentee, but I work as a head of product of a startup called Runa HR, which is a payroll and also human resources software.
Awesome. John.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Masterson, and I am the Chief Product Officer at ImproveWell. We are a workforce engagement platform based in London, and I am a mentor in this program.
Marvin.
Hey everyone, my name is Marvin Matthew. I'm based in New York City, and I'm the head of product at a cryptocurrency trading platform called Bitsium, and I'm a product mentee.
Nicola.
Hey, I'm Nicola. I'm based in Copenhagen. I'm product manager in a company called 2021 AI, and I'm a mentee.
Patrick.
Hey everyone, so my name is Patrick Hoffman. I'm a mentor based in the Bay Area, so San Francisco. And I work at a company called Udacity. I head up product for our enterprise division.
Awesome. Vivek.
Hi, everyone. I'm from Bangalore, Vivek, PM in Recipe. I'm a mentee in this program.
Yogesh.
Hi, guys. I'm Yogesh. I'm a product mentor. I'm based in New York City, and I work as a senior product manager in the company called the Omnicom Health Group.
And Candice.
Hi, I'm Candice Zhang. I'm a mentee in this program. So I'm based in New Jersey, and I'm a head of product of a company called 10-4.
Awesome. Just as a reminder, please post your questions to the Q&A section at theproductmentor.com/live. As the questions come in, I will jump in and pass them over to Patrick during the talk. I am Nis Fromm. I am the one of the mentor leads for the program and your moderator for today's live stream. And without further ado, I will hand it over to Patrick.
Thanks, Ness. So today's talk, I'm going to be kind of diving into some different ways to think about product organization and about product teams within the larger organization of a company. So the focus is going to be a bit around the core activities that product teams go through, but also how those change and evolve over time during the life of a company, the life of a product. So as I mentioned during the check-in part, my name is Patrick Hoffman. I head a product over at Udacity for Enterprise. So Udacity is an online training technology company. Our mission is to really help people power their careers through learning technology, and in my case, help companies actually power that by getting them to be more efficient with their training, upskilling, etc. So really care about experiences, and again, making great experiences for my customers. So in terms of the rule of 7, think about how you structure any product organization. I think as with many product decisions, it's really key to step back and actually think about the context first, which is your business, right? You need to understand your business, your product, and your teams. And so you want to think about that in kind of two ways. One, where you are today, as well as where you're going to be in the future. These are just some questions that you might ask yourself. For instance, like, what's the stage of the business? For those who haven't been exposed to maybe different readings on this or different thoughts, most businesses go through different stages, right? Amazon today is not the same Amazon as 1994, 1995. Who are the customers you're serving today, right? Again, the customers that Amazon is serving today are quite different than those they started serving when it was just a book delivery service. And then what types of products are you producing today? Again, over time, if you're successful, you'll start adding more products to the market. If you're not successful, you're going to be trying to get your products to fit the market. And then you want to think about what are the customers wanting you to do today that maybe you weren't already doing. And then most importantly, what's the team? What is it that you are able to do with the team that you have? And again, like basically the same questions in the future. And this is really important as it comes to your product organization. As you look at where are we today, where we want to go, and is my team, is my organization, is that everything set up to actually help me get to that spot? And if it's not, you're going to want to be making adjustments as you go, right? So then after answering these questions, that can be your North Star saying this is where we should be heading. And that helps you then backfill into how are you going to recruit people? How are you going to hire people? How are you going to organize and scale your teams so that they can be successful at this stage, but also say you get, the wonderful thing that enterprise SaaS companies target, right? Which is triple, double. Like, with that kind of growth, in the span of a year, you might go from where half your organization is product and R&D to where less than 20% of your organization is product and R&D, and most of your organization is sales and marketing and that online growth part of the company. And when that happens, your role as product shifts a lot, right? Your communication has to improve a lot. How you enable your sales team has to change and improve. And so you should keep that in mind when thinking about where you are today. And as part of that, there are some frameworks that can help, such as the Crossing the Chasm framework from Jeffrey Moore, really classical one, pretty much. If you're not aware of it, like as a PM, go dive deep, figure out more about it. There's always going to be chasms in a product and in a company. Part of this ties back to product market fit, but also, and this is something that's coming out more and more, once you have product market fit, do you actually have go-to-market fit? Do you have the ability to really take it out and scale? And so those are things to be aware of, and there's other talks that we've done here at the Product Mentor Group that touch on those different points and how to understand when you have them, when you don't have them. Other ones that could help is to think about it in terms of an organism or a population, right? And so in many ways, people might look at the past behavior, the past performance of a team, of a company, of a product group, and try and forward project. And, you can always see those lovely hockey stick curves that companies will do as they're trying to raise funding or make a case to the market that they're really worth adopting and worth investing in. But like most populations, where things come up like survival of the fittest, et cetera, it's a case of where's your business, where's your product today, what are the characteristics, traits it has today, and what's the market condition, right? And so it's really important when looking at your forward prospects of understanding, okay, not just where are we today, where have we come from, right? Have we been doing this crazy growth? But what's the market going to be like a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? And that includes your customers, but also your vendors, your providers, technological trends underneath, right? For instance, things that you maybe would have spent 4 years building building in the past. Now, thanks to technology like Docker and others, you can probably get that spun up in less than a month and maybe even a weekend. And because of that, that means that there's more and more competitors that could just come in and come into your market. And so that then influences and should be influencing how you think about your product and about your team that's going after making that product be viable in the super long term. Which ties back then also to, as a product manager, and particularly as you scale up in your career as a product manager, you want to be cognizant of investment horizons. So remember, your job as product is both to really make something delightful and valuable to customers, but you're doing that in order to bring money into your business, right? You are there to serve your business, to make it viable so that in the long term, it continues to exist, continues to be able to provide that value to your customers. And it's important then to be able to think not only of, okay, if I start building this feature set, or if I'm going after this completely greenfield new product, what's the return curve, right? So is it going to be something that I'm working on and I expect to derive value from it in less than the next 6 months? Or is it something that it's going to take a while to invest into? Say, for instance, if it's a new type of hardware, or going after a really hard challenge in machine learning, and it's something that I won't get to actually realize revenue in the case of like bringing value to your customers for years, right? And if you're starting off early as a company, you probably, depending on where you are and depending on your funding and your viability and also your team, you may not want to go after a problem that's going to be 5 years to the point where you just first get to start having customers come in the door, right? You're going to try and scale that back. Instead of going after the car, maybe you go after a scooter, something that's a bit simpler and solves part of the same problem. So thinking about that, right, and thinking about the different stages that you go through, it's often really good to think of it in terms of growth. And so here Slack is one of those examples, right? And so bottom right is that reference to in SaaS growth, you really want to have that triple, double scenario going on. Like that's your target in the first 5 years. You just got to grow. You've got to get that massive momentum in order to be able to deal with all the debt that you're going to potentially be accruing as a new business or a new product unit that's coming out, right? In those first 5 years, you're going to potentially take shortcuts. You're trying to get that market fit. And because of that, you have to get that growth in order to be able to pay down that debt later. And an interesting thing, right? So like Slack is held up as a perfect example of that. But if you look at that far right one and you go into that snapshot, right? So that snapshot is the same period, right? And it's when Slack was first starting. And on one scale, and this is kind of the trick with data, you don't want to lie to yourself, even if you're presenting things in a very optimum light for investors and others. They made it look like a hockey stick type scenario happening, and that even after a drop, they're recovering. The reality is when you look at that longer trend, it's actually quite flat. And in graphics today that they've done, now that they're actually viable 6 years later, they leave that as being actually the very flat part of the curve. And so your business and your product team at that stage needs to operate very differently than the product team for where Slack is now, right? So you may get into doing fake door tests and other experiments to validate what parts of your product to invest in, what parts of your business to invest in, and what markets to go after. You'll end up doing as much user experience interviewing and things like that at that point, but you'll probably interpret some of those signals differently, right? You're going after different markets. So early Slack, bottoms up, come at the team level, and then Slack today, they still have that. It's very core, but they also have opened up a lot of enterprise side for coming in top down and into a business, having integrations, having channel sales partners, doing things with Microsoft. All of that are things that Slack and the product team today do that really Slack and the product team back in 2014, 2015, they wouldn't be doing. And so a similar, point looking at, say, Uber, right? They just went IPO last year. And depending on what you look at in your data, right? Are you looking at the total value, the total revenue coming in? That's one important metric. But another one that, CEOs often think about is what's your growth rate? And this gets back to that, factor earlier about the doubling and the tripling, right? And so tripling is technically its higher growth rate percentage. Like you're going, let's say 300% and then 200%. So 200% growth next to 300% growth looks like you're shrinking. But the reality is if you're continuing, if that base number is larger, you're still getting significant growth. And so try to be aware of the data when you're looking at it, when you're looking at your past data, but also understand that as this happens, right, this can result in existential crises inside of businesses, right? If the growth rate starts to flatten, you're no longer telling the story to the market, to your investors, that perhaps your board and your executives team wants you to be telling them. And so that's going to have a very big impact on you as a product manager and how you approach products where you choose to invest. And, maybe this is particular to technology companies, but in many ways this applies to every company, right? If you go and look at the latest AT&T earnings call, like you can see that they're also dealing with some of this growth and people saying, they're not getting the growth that we're expecting. These other areas are shrinking too rapidly. And all of this fits into how you approach product, where you as a large product team choose to invest, but also you as an individual IC, how are you handling the work is the thing that you're working on even going to ship and bring value? And how you think about that is key. How you work with other teams becomes key, because these are signals that really run through the whole company as you're building product. Which ties back then to, and this maybe is less applicable to folks when you're like a mid-level IC or a senior IC, but once you flip over or once you're able to start really informing your organization, it's really key to have organizing philosophies. But as I'll touch on later, it's also really important not to fall into a trap here, right? And so you want to understand that things that work in one place may not in another. So I'll touch on that later as well. But there's basically like at times two ways of coming at this, right? You can come at it from start with a customer, start with your market, start with like, where are we, right? So given this marketplace, given these market conditions, given these people that we're trying to target, what is the thing that we should create, right? So if you were like, say, walk down to a park, you'd have to, and you want to choose what animal am I going to build, you would look at, okay, what's going on? What is the thing that I can add to this ecosystem that will be successful in it, right? And so a really simple framework that can help with pieces of that, and this is like high level, right, is to think about what's existing and what's new. And in this case, it's both you, your company, and your products, but also your markets, your customers, right? And when you do that, you end up with basically 4 buckets into which you as a product team, you as a product group can fall. And the reality is you can fall into more than one, right? Depending on what you're focusing on. And when you're in each of those buckets, you're going to have a different approach to product. You're going to have a different kind of energy driving you, right? And so growth factors in a bit, delighting the customers factor in a bit, but the challenges that you and your product team will face in, say, an area of product diversification are far different than those in market penetration, right? Your need to do really deep user research and design research may be significantly more of an investment in that product diversification time than in the market penetration, where you really focus on how you optimize that repeatable sales motion and making sure that you're getting in front of the right customers and giving them more of the right product, right? And so that's just a framework to leave with you when you think about where's your product today and where's your company and your customers today. Another one is to perhaps start from a really, what people talk about as a trusted model, right? Over the last, decade at least, there's been tons of different books published, how Google works, presentations given by people like the CPO over at Box about what's the ideal method to organize, right? And of late, there's at least been a shift to like some people saying that there's an ideal model, right? And they talk about like pods and P pods and things like that. And so I'm just going to like walk you through one potential example of what might be an idealized org, and mostly walk thinking of other product people you work with, and therefore informing how they look at an organization. So if your company happens to go through a growth decline and you need to reorganize, or you start scaling rapidly and you need to just double down, this may be underpinning how other product people or other leaders are looking at your team, your organization. And you want to be wary, right? Like going back to that point before, you want to make sure that you're actually structuring it for your market, for your customers, and for your business, both where it is today and where you want to be in the future. You don't want to just take a framework off the shelf and say, okay, we're applying this to this company. You want to make sure that what you're applying actually fits and works with your company, your customers, and the market. And so, this is kind of one of the ideas of why you go after this. So PPODs is basically product management, engineering, analytics, which think of like business insights, program management. Those folks keep the trains going on time. And in some companies, the first P and the second P get bound together. But then your growth, so like online growth is a huge thing today, right? Like 10 years ago, maybe we'd be talking more about like hitting the ground, boots, out of home type selling. But really today, almost every product, you're going to have an online growth component where people are doing digital marketing, people are doing sales, where we're hopping on Zoom and I'm doing a sales call from that. D for design, and then, S for that support, right? And part of this factors into like your customer and the market, like it's huge. And you as a product manager, you'll get like the snap of it, right? You'll work with other teams to try and understand, but end of the day, like you're dealing with this massive thing, say it's an elephant, and you may only get one piece of it. And all of these other teams are getting so many other pieces of this puzzle that you as a PM, by like helping bridge between them. When you do that, you really start painting that picture of the customer, painting that picture of the market, and therefore understanding their needs and what you should be building into. And so, product management, as I mentioned, right, you're like at the nexus, right? And so some of those groups mentioned earlier, they're on one side, right? They're tied more to that R&D. Like, what is it that we should be building it? What is it that we are now building? And then the other side is really, okay, great, we've built something. We've built something that we want to bring to market. How do we go about distributing it? How do we go about making sure that our team is best positioned to distribute it? How we market it, how we talk about it, how we educate customers, but also how we serve those customers so that they keep coming back, so that they trust us to buy more. And so like that is key for you as that product manager to set that vision, to work with your product management team to set that vision, and then to bridge between those two areas. And, early in your career, maybe you're only on one half of that puzzle. Maybe you're at the R&D side, or maybe you're on the growth side. You're a product manager who's helping serve your marketing and sales team, giving them tooling, helping make them more efficient, helping educate them about what the pitch is. But over time, as you level up in your career, you're going to definitely be bridging both of those and needing to be aware of how to work with teams in both of those areas. Engineering, of course, those are the folks developing, building it. Analytics, if you can be aware of it as a PM, how to use it, how to pick up, SQL, do some data analysis. But if not, you know how to work with people who are in the analytics teams, how to basically ask them a question in a way that they can go to your data and they can run a query that will produce an answer to that question that you can use to then inform your business. And you want to be asking these people as well to weigh in, right? They're looking at the data all day. You may not be. Program management, again, like really the kind of the folks that keep the trains running on time. In much smaller organizations, you as the product manager will likely be doing this, right? You may be doing a couple of these other roles too, depending on the size and the stage of your business or your team, right? You could be a small carved off team in a larger business. You haven't hired design yet. So you as the PM have to be doing wireframes and figuring out what's the right flow, what's the right structure, doing that user research that you might depend on designers to do. And so similarly, right, like when I first got to Udacity in enterprise, we had a marketing team for a bit. And then due to the change in direction on enterprise, that marketing team left. And suddenly I, as the PM, I was responsible for our marketing. I was responsible for making sure that our ad campaigns were structured in the right way, that our copywriting was being done in the right way to communicate our product, but also that we were leveraging these wonderful new tools of digital marketing to get signal from the market. What is the right way to talk about this? What is the right imagery to use? What are the right products that we're building, right? If I put two things out, which one's going to get more attention from the marketing, help my sales team close deals? And so you as a PM, definitely like over time, you may shift towards one or another of these areas, but having broad exposure, awareness, and ability to operate in these areas is really key to your growth. And I'll touch on that part later too. And again, so design, like I mentioned, it's both existing products, how you're improving them, but also going after the new products, which gets into user research cuts through, but ideation, these new ones, design fits into it, both system level, but also application level. And so like design is a really a key part, right? So product design engineering, your classical conception of what product is, but really product is bridging all the way through. And then support is one that if you end up reading some of the articles or the books or hearing people talk about it, it often gets left behind, right? Or they bundle it in with growth, and pieces of it can, right? Success is a means of making your customers like really happy with your product, really want to come back and get the best use out of it. But it also touches into things like warranties, SLAs, and other things that maybe aren't as often associated with that. And you as a product manager, and particularly like in, say, a company under even 75 people, right? You as a PM will often be responsible for coming in and informing people about how you should be structuring warranties for your product, what types of SLAs you can be going after, and working with your engineering team and other operational teams to really structure that out and make it a reality, and then bundle that as part of your product, make that a selling proposition for your product to your customers. And so like, it's good to have like those frameworks, right? So you've got like the organism model and like, what is it to survive in this ecosystem? You have, okay, if we just had the ideal system, we're going to do this and drop it down, and no matter what, potentially we win. That's good and all. But then how do you structure your product org, right? And this is one where maybe open up to the audience a bit more as you guys should be thinking about it. And that's like, if you were to look at this example, right? And we'll take a few minutes here. Like, think about, why would this team be structured in this way, right? So why is analytics and the design team? Why are those reporting into product? And why is the product team structured at a feature level, right? At a surface area, which is saying, like, if you were Uber, for instance, maybe there's a feature lead that's dealing with the algorithm that's serving the matching. And there's a feature lead that's dealing with the mobile application. There's a feature lead dealing with promotions. And there's a feature lead dealing with the rider behavior, et cetera, right? All the way down, right? Just like each thing, instead of you being holistic, covering the whole product, you're covering a very narrow surface area. And then why is the engineering like similarly matched up to where there's groups that are kind of serving into the feature leads, but at times bridging over? And why is growth only going into certain engineering groups? So that's a question, right? And it's possible that it's bound to the stage of the company. It's possible it's bound to the type of team in place, right? So the reasons that analytics and design might be reporting into product, it could be that either the business is young at a certain stage and therefore they don't have those types of leaders, or it could be that it's big and it's mature and again they just don't have those leaders. And so the product person, they have those deep T's in data and design, and so they are helping run those teams. They're helping set the vision for not just product, but for design and for the data teams. And so we'll look at some other examples going on, but keep that in mind when you're looking at your own product organization, your own company organization, right? And ask yourself, like, why is it structured this way? Often it's going to be bound to the people you have, the trust that those people have with, higher up in the organization, but also across adjacent organizations, right? And so that's really something key to think about. And another thing here, like that you're seeing potentially, is that growth is divorced from analytics and design, right? So if growth wants to get information about analytics, or if growth wants to get design done, they actually have to like ladder up, head over to the product lead, and only from then are they going to get served by analytics and design, right? So like, what are the dysfunctions, or what are the functional improvements that maybe result from that kind of Chinese wall existing between, and growth having to navigate and hit those other teams in that way, right? And growth in this area, think about marketers, for instance, and the different types of marketers perhaps that you've worked with. Those that maybe think very intentionally and can forecast out, and those that are just trying to get the next greatest thing shipped as fast as possible, right? And think about those dynamics between those teams, right? Think about the people you've seen in design and in analytics, and how those personalities may mix or not mix with other types of those personalities. And so this other example kind of touches on more of that classical pod structure, right? And so you've got like your executive team, and they ladder, and they have different groups, right? And so like maybe here there's this horizontal layer. There's a question of, okay, is there, an actual chief product officer type role? Potentially there is up in that, but potentially depending on where the business is, maybe they have GMs or, VPs of product for these different verticals that are running their groups underneath that. And we'll touch on like how teams of teams kind of help structure out later and what that might look like there. But think about like, why would a company end up structuring itself like this? What stage of business might they be at that this is now kind of their standard way of doing things, where engineering is bound to product? It's matrixed into itself, but it's bound to product, where operations are now bound actually to a product area, product line, or perhaps even a geographic product business line, where data again is bound, but matrixed. The design is bound and potentially not matrixed. And then again, support is bound. Like, why would a business start kind of bundling things in that way? What are the efficiencies you gain from that? And also, what are the lack of efficiencies that start happening? And where would that business be going in the future? Something important to think about. And this third example, is somewhat, it's a blend. It comes in from these other ones. These are actually like, by the way, examples of business organizations I've seen in companies I've worked at, and companies I've worked for. So I'm not saying that they're the right way or the best way or even the worst way. They're just a way. And back to that first point, like, it results from their environment, the traits that they have, people they have. All of these things are informing how they end up organizing, and they may change over time, right? Like this, what we're seeing here may actually evolve into what we saw in example 2, or it may have started from what was example 1. And so in this one, right, it's interesting to look at it because there's potentially this very large area of the business, right, that maybe is bringing in all of the revenue for it. And then they've sliced off another subset and they said, okay, like this is an area we're going to invest in. That could be 1, it could be 3, it could be 5, right? It could be a dozen, depending on the size of the business. Maybe, Google is a good example where so much of the revenue comes from their ad space, and yet they keep spinning off these experiments, right? They had shopping and express, they have the Google Home and the hardware, YouTube, all these other business lines that, end up feeding back into that larger entity, but that larger entity, right, is that like really strong growth engine. And in that, like how that growth, how that team driving it may end up actually driving the product. And Google probably isn't a good example of that one, but there are businesses where instead of product being adjacent to marketing growth, actually product reports into growth. And the growth team is helping set what are the types of products we want to go after, like what are the categories we want to play in, what are the markets we want to play in, and then product is helping serve to that of how to best play in that market, how to play in that category, but also informing growth so they can make the right bets, right? And then product at that point, like they're bridging to growth, but they're really bound to and dealing with all of these things down funnel of the engineering. And the other thing here to note is that like data, it's no longer potted off, right? It's a team of data. So you might be landing requests in. So how does that impact life for you as a product manager? How does that impact like the way your team operates if you no longer have the ability to just land a request and get it served immediately, but you have to put it into a queue? And you have to now understand the performance of that queue, the prioritization of that queue, and when the work request you've landed will actually come back to you. And that applies here again to design, but then also like to operations and support, right? So like if you raise an issue, if you are getting signal in, maybe it's feeding to your team, maybe it's not feeding right to your team, and you don't find out about it until later that there's been an outage or a negative customer experience, right? Because you're not sitting right next to that support person, you're not bound to them where you can hear what's going on. And so how does that change your approach to product, to how you're building things? And so this is all like contextualizing in to get up to like this team of teams type thing, right? And there's really like, there's many ways of thinking about this, but there's 2 dominant philosophies that are kind of taking over. And there's this one, right, which is a very flat organization. And for many new startups, right, early on, they've kind of adopted this model, like we have to be flat, right? So it's like maybe the CEO and then a whole bunch of people. And under these people, there's as many people as possible, right? We don't want to be bound with management and hierarchies and escalations. We want to have as much information go from layer to layer as fast as possible. And certain companies, have adopted models like this at scale, right? So if you read how Google works, they talk about how they don't want to have fewer than 7 direct reports coming to somebody, right? They want to have far more than 7. And on this next slide, we'll kind of talk through maybe why that is. And so in this next one, right, and this is one I've actually seen done at other companies, it's a very different structure, and it's saying actually like we're going to cap it and say we don't want you to have any more than 5 or 6 direct reports. And so you end up with a very vertically deep organization, a lot of hierarchy going on, a lot of potentially as you get down to a layer, you'll now have one manager with 1 report, which seems a little bit odd, right? That they have to give so much of their time. It's just 1 report. And why different groups kind of end up on either side of this, right? The first group may intentionally be trying to structure themselves to minimize the micromanagement that can result from an organizational model like this. It may be that they're used to that, or they found it to be successful, right? And there are definitely companies that have run that way, and there are definitely successful companies that have run more in this way, right? Where it's very top down, where what you're going to be working on is defined by the people above you, rather than okay, given the vision of the company, what are the areas and the initiatives that my team is aware of that we have the skills to go after, the ability to learn skills to go after, and how do we then communicate that upward, right? That happens a lot in that first model, whereas this last one is very much like, here's the mandate, and it flows down, right? And it's always flowing down, very hierarchical. And there is also like, of course, a blend between these. But think about like your product, and if you were to have to be running your team inside of this model versus say the other model, what would change? How would it change how you approach the job of product management, how you approach communication, the ease with which you're able to say reach across, right? Like maybe in this case, there's even rigid rules where if you're AV, right, you can't really get easy hold of BV. You have to ladder up, escalate to A, who's going to bring it to B and bring it down. What does that do for you as a product manager and how you're working? And this could be both product teams as you grow and scale, but it could be, and really often the case, like product and growth and others, right? So how does that happen? How do silos impact how you end up doing your work, or how do the lack of silos impact how you're doing your work? And then, of course, like both of those really factor into like, and this is one important as well for you as an IC, so an individual contributor, as much as for when you're a manager, right? And that's positioning your people to win. So like, let's say that you're on a hiring panel and you're going out and you're interviewing, dozens of product managers in the last couple of months trying to bring people in. You're not like, you could in some companies just hire to fill the role, like exactly fit, like we know exactly what we want. You could be hiring for generalist types, people that come in and you are then going to work with them to make them successful. And ideally any business, you'd be doing that, right? And this is a key thing then for when you look at these structures as a manager, as a product leader, or as you come into a completely like new business to you, right? Like let's say that you've chosen to go to a new company. The company has been around for 15 years, right? Or 20 years. And the companies you've been at maybe previously were run a different way. And now you come in and you kind of, you map out your organization, you start seeing where the ley lines are, where the connections are, and you start seeing how this organization operates. How do you now make yourself successful in there so that you can achieve what you want? But also if you're coming in as a leader, right, managing other people, how do you look at this and understand whether it's working, whether it's not working, and how to help drive that change management, right? How do you help move the company and the team to be where it needs to be for you to hit your objectives as a product leader? And so I'm not going to go deep on that now, but there's tons to go and read up on how to do that and how to structure the relationships, manager to IC, but also manager to manager, and empowering your people that are reporting into you to really be successful. But beyond that, like the next stage is then thinking about scaling, right? And this is an important thing both for yourself as you scale yourself in your career, and the fact that you can go up and down, right? There's plenty of people I've seen who have scaled up, become a director, and then perhaps they've switched to another business and they've scaled back, right, to a senior product manager or a principal PM. They're going and becoming an IC again to get to know their new space and then scale up within that organization, within that space. But also then how do you scale your teams, right? If you're going to go after a new company, a new business, or even a new product line, right, you're going to experience many of the same challenges, right? Which is you may get rocket ship growth, you may get growth that takes you to a bit and then flat lines, you may be flat. So, and then get growth. And so it's important to understand, like, as you're scaling, and it gets back to that first model of the ecosystem, right? If you're taking your past behavior and predicting that forward, you may start scaling or structuring or hiring your team in a certain way. And should the way you scaled not actually meet that reality of what's going on, you need to be really agile and adept at looking at it and questioning what you've done and perhaps scaling back down or just delaying the pace at which you're scaling, right? And so for yourself, right, this is a potential model. If you go and look up many of the companies out there, those with more formalized matrices and structures, they may have an actual path, right? So you can even come in as an IC0, like an associate PM, and then over time you're scaling up, and eventually, like, you're a staff product manager or a principal product manager, but you're that lead, right? You're not necessarily managing people at an HR level, negotiating salaries and dealing with retention and all of that. But you are making sure that your teams are optimized, that you are delivering and reaching the goals that your leaders have been setting, that you yourself are setting. And then there may or may not be an amount of overlap, right, between these two levels as far as like how they're perceived within the company. And that's when you flip to, say, more of a manager side. And as you scale from manager, right, you may end up over time, actually, that far end is you're now a manager of managers, right? And what does that look like when you are now managing, say, group PMs or directors of product who have many people underneath them? And how does that influence how you approach product then? How do you help those people at your level, but also skip leveling down? How do you make them successful? How do you kind of state the vision for not just your product, but how you're going to organize your product, how you're going to make people want to really be working with you and at your company to go after the market problem that you're going for, so you can actually make those customers happy. And like similarly then, think about scaling your product organization, right? So if you're a 10-person startup, right, maybe there's like 1 PM and maybe you're doing design a bunch of things. Then you scale, maybe you've gone to 100 people, right? And now you've started having maybe different functional areas. And you're running, potentially reporting in B and C reporting data, potentially running parallel, right? And just working as kind of one mind pod. And then scale that up, right? Now you're going to be 1,000 people, or say you're 10,000. Say you're like one of those really wildly successful businesses. Maybe you're 30 years old now, something like an Adobe or a Cisco, et cetera. And then how do you structure yourself there? And how do you as a business leader within your company, how do you think about where you are today and how to keep moving yourself to there, right? And whether or not you need to shift back, right? So if you spent time looking at the news or anything else, like you'll see Uber, for instance, just got rid of 400 people from their marketing group. So what does that mean? How has that changed how those parts of the growth work with product? Or General Motors, who closed an entire product line, right? Just shut factories down. That's a product division. That's a product line that product leaders are running and saying, okay, here are our vendors, here are suppliers, here's the things we're going to bring in and build, and it's for this customer market. And now leadership's saying, actually, like, we're going to cut off that branch of the tree. We're not going to be investing resources in that anymore. So what impact does that have on the rest of the business? Do you start restructuring or doing things differently as you deal with that challenge? And so, of course, like, throughout all of this, standard stuff that all product people we need to know, and it's really key to us, right? How do you build it over cycles? How do you enable yourself to fail? Maybe you can keep a fail resume or a fail diary where you track, like, what are the failures, right? Like, you'll often learn far more from that than you will from your successes. And this is kind of is going to fight back into as well a point about survivorship, right? Survivorship bias, right? So the classic example of that was B-29 bombers back during World War II, flying over, getting shot down, some making it back. And the people who looked at the ones coming back were like, oh my gosh, they're riddled with bullets in all these areas. We should totally go and put like metal over these areas and make them more sound. But they're completely ignoring all the ones that never made it back. They're not going and studying those things that didn't make it back. And if they had, perhaps they would say, actually, it's all the areas where these weren't shot that is critical, that if you do get shot here, that's where you're going down. And the same thing kind of factors into companies, right? With all of the kind of the growth and looking at companies of different sizes, writing about them, saying what's the best, what's not the best. We often aren't writing about the ones that didn't survive, right? We're not going and doing deep dives into why did this business fail, right? And, some of that's starting to shift as you get maybe more famous examples like Theranos, which is like they looked like a perfect growth company and then it was rotten from the core, right? And the thing is, like, how much of that can you dive deep and understand? Is it tied to not just the customers, the market, the product organization? Like, you as a PM, as a product leader over time, don't just look at the winning cases. Definitely go and study those failures, study what's been going on, and try and figure out a pattern, right? Like, of what works, what doesn't, but also, is it that there's actually certain types of models that make you better? Are these models changing in time? Like, is how we organize our businesses today going to be radically different than, say, 10 years from now? For instance, like, one of the things I'm really keen on and aware of is, okay, there's been so much more technology to enable us to be remote, to work remotely effectively. Is that going to change how I structure my business, 5 years from now when I started, or 10 years from now? And so look at that, right? Like, there may be models that are winning that are just as well represented in the failure case, right? And which brings back the point of, like, in the B-29, the classic example, it's a fairly finite bound, right? Like, the B-29 was a pretty standard vehicle. Pilots were very well trained. Sure, there's deviations, but they're pretty much normalized. And they're going into the same environment. They're going after the same types of areas, which have guns, et cetera, shooting up at them and other planes. And so it's not as wildly different as, like, the market of where we operate business. And also, they're far more uniform for the number they are than what we. So there's a lot more data points. Whereas, back when I was at Social Bicycles, right, we had 16 different competitors in the bike share technology space. But that's 16, right? That's not a lot of data points. So how do we know what of our success came from our product organization, from just the product we built, from the customers we had targeted? All of these different factors come in. And so just another thing to really leave you with for product leadership is thinking about your complex system, trying to simplify as much as you can in different areas to conceive of how you're going through questions at certain stages, but also just like really be aware that you may end up having biases built in and try and challenge those biases. And that's it. I'd love to, maybe we can talk for a bit, hear what types of product organization models you've seen, not seen work, which ones you've liked working in or not liked working in. Because this is definitely something I'm going to be dealing with for the rest of my career in product. So it's something I care a lot about.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. There were a number of questions, but we are on a tight time schedule here as the second kind of shift of the day begins. But you do have questions from Candice, Fabiola, and Marvin. I encourage everyone to email Patrick with their questions and continue the conversation offline. But again, thank you, Patrick, for today's discussion of the Rule of 7, how to structure your product organization to succeed. As always, the presentation will also be posted to our SlideShare channel. A big thank you from me, Nisrom, mentor lead and moderator for today's talks. To everyone else who joined us today from the Product Mentor. And don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor, visit theproductmentor.com.